Hi, we're back, so be it, and we are on chapter 19. It's called No. Even though it was cold out, I waited for Roy outside. Now that I knew he was taking me to Hilltop, I wasn't angry at him anymore. The morning paper was on the porch, rolled up next to the welcome mat. I took it out to the rope hammock so I could swing and read to help pass the time until he got there. I'd combed my hair like Ruby had told me to, though there was still a lot of big tangles hidden underneath. I got in the hammock and opened the paper randomly to the science section, where an article caught my eye. It was about dinosaurs and how nobody really knows what color they were because you can't tell by looking at the bones. Ruby came out on the porch and called to me. "Heidi, Bernadette's on the phone." I ran inside. "Bernie, I'm sorry I didn't call you this morning. I've been so busy," I said. "I was planning to call you later." "It's okay, baby," she said. "The reason I'm calling is because we need to talk about something important." She sounded serious. "What is it?" I asked. "You need to come home now," she said. "Your mama and I need you to come home." Going back to Reno was about the last thing on my mind at that moment. Any minute now, Roy would be there to take me to Hilltop. I was sure he'd found out something important. Otherwise, why would he be coming to get me? "I can't come home, Bernie, not yet. I've got to stay here until I find out everything. Elliot says Mama's word, Bernie. Did I tell you that already? And Santa Claus is Thurman Hill. Roy's coming to get me right now. Something big is happening, Bernie. I just know it." "You need to come home, Heidi," Bernadette said again. "Right away." That's when I looked out the window and saw Roy's car pull into the driveway. "He's here, Bernie. Roy's here, and I have to go. I'll call you later and tell you everything," I said. I didn't ask her to kiss Mama for me or even wait to hear her say goodbye. I hung up, waved to Ruby, and ran out to meet to meet Roy. "What you got there?" he asked as I hopped into the front seat and closed the door. I still had the newspaper in my hand. I must have taken it in with me when Ruby called me in to answer the phone. "I was reading something about dinosaurs," I said. "Well, what about them?" Roy said. "Turns out nobody knows what color they were," I said. "I thought they were green," he said. "Well, that's what everybody thinks, but nobody knows for sure, 'cause you can't tell from the bones," I said. Actually, this book was written in 2004, but I found a recent article in Discover magazine that they actually are starting to think they can tell a little bit about what color dinosaurs were. And I will put a link to that article in my library newsletter for this week, if you're interested. "Did you show my pictures to that lawyer?" "No," said Roy, "I didn't." "Well, why not?" I asked, turning in my seat to look at him. "That's the only proof we've got that Mama was at Hilltop." "It's complicated," said Roy. "Well, what's complicated?" I asked. "The whole thing, but I don't want to talk about it until we get there," Roy said. "Well, why not? Why can't you just tell me what you know?" I asked. "It's really not mine to tell, Heidi. We're almost there. Just leave it at that for now, okay?" he said. I didn't understand, but I could tell Roy wasn't going to budge. We drove in silence for a while. Roy turned the radio on, and I looked out the window at nothing in particular. It was Roy who finally broke the silence. As we turned off the road and started up the steep driveway to Hilltop, he asked me if I thought it mattered. "If what matters?" I said. "What colors dinosaurs were," he said. "Not really," I told him. "No matter what color they were, they're still extinct, right?" "Good point," said Roy. "But that doesn't mean I wouldn't still like to know," I said. "Wouldn't you?" "Sure, but it doesn't sound like we ever will," Roy said. "If somebody wants to know badly enough, they'll find a way to figure it out," I said. "You think?" said Roy. "Believe me, Heidi, there are some things in life a person just can't know." "Yeah," I said, Not quite ready yet to believe. Roy turned off the engine and reached into the back seat for his hat. We both opened our doors. As he put on his hat and got out of the car, he tilted his head back and looked up at the sky, and I did the same. The sun was bright overhead, and there was not a cloud in sight. A flock of dark birds was moving across the wide expanse of blue sky, small parts of a bigger whole. I wondered if they knew that every time they changed the tilt of their wings, slowed down or sped up, it altered the shape of the entire formation. I wonder if Heidi is thinking about that in relationship to her life too. We walked up the steps past the rocking chairs and the pots of flowers, but right before we went inside, Roy stopped and put a hand on my shoulder. Heidi, he said, some of what we talk about in here today may not be easy for you to hear. Well, the only part that's hard is not knowing, I said. I don't care what anybody says, as long as it's finally the truth. Shall we start with Diane DeMuth? Asked Mr. Dietz. Thurman Hill's lawyer was short and bald and had a voice that sounded like someone was squeezing his neck whenever he tried to talk. We were in the alcove. Thurman Hill was sitting in the red chair where I had first come upon Elliot sleeping. It was turned around now, away from the window, and someone had brought in 3 wooden folding chairs for the rest of us to sit on. Mr. Dietz pulled a long white envelope out of his pocket, opened it, and took out several folded sheets of paper. According to county records, she was born here in Liberty, he said. There's no record of a marriage, only a birth, a female child, Sophia Lynn DeMuth, born to Diane at Liberty West Hospital 30 years ago on November the 23rd. According to the medical records, the child was born with significant damage. He stopped talking then, folded the papers, and stuck them back in the envelope. There was an uncomfortable silence. Roy shifted in his chair and cleared his throat. Well, I don't understand, I said. Who's Diane DeMuth, and what does this have to do with Mama? It's complicated, Roy said again. Mr. Dietz nodded, turned to Thurman Hill, and asked, How would you like to proceed, sir? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sat there staring at his hands, which were folded in his lap. Finally, the silence was more than I could bear. You lied about my mother, I said. She was here, and you know it. Why don't you just tell the truth now? Thurman Hill looked up then. I thought he would be furious at me for accusing him of lying. I expected the sea glass eyes to be flashing angrily at me the way they had the day before. But instead, to my surprise, I saw that they were filled with tears. This is wrong, he said. I'd like to ask you 2 gentlemen to leave so that I can talk to the girl alone. I don't want to be alone with you, I said. Roy, don't leave. But Roy and Mr. Dietz both stood up. I don't want to be alone with him, I said again. He thinks I'm somebody I'm not. No, Heidi, said Thurman Hill, looking directly at me now. I know exactly who you are. And that's the end of chapter 19. See you next time.